Okay, now I'm going to summarize for you what we've gone over in the last several segments. We started with Adam at creation, and we discovered that the year in which he was created was counted as months, and that his first year of age is counted as the year after that. Then we put all the pieces together until we got down to Noah, and we showed that when Noah was 500 years old, he had his eldest son. And we showed that Shem was born when Noah was 502, because Shem was 100 years old, 2 years after the flood, and the flood began in the 600th year of Noah. This also shows, we also learned from another scripture that Ham was his youngest son, making Japheth the son that was born when Noah was 500 years old. Then we worked the chronology forward until we got to Terah, and we found a similar situation with Terah's 3 sons. And we found that the oldest, Haran, who died in the land of his birth, was probably the son who was born when he was 70. We learn by taking a clue from the book of Acts and the implication of the text that Terah lived 205 years and then he died, and then Abraham was 75 at the time, and that's when Abraham went to Canaan, making that link. Then we worked our way down to Isaac, and we find that Isaac is Abraham's seed, and this is when the 400 years begins in order to work our way forward to the Exodus. We worked our way through Jacob and also backwards from Jacob's life to find out when he entered Egypt, and found out that they were in Egypt 210 years. We also linked Jacob's life to the fact that he went after the second year of famine and that there were 5 years of famine left. Then we go back to creation and fill in the sabbatical and jubilee years, and we find that the 7 years of plenty and the 7 years of famine actually do synchronize with a septennial cycle counted from creation. Also counting forward to the Exodus and the entry into the land, we see that the same cycle synchronizes with Israel's entry into the land of Israel and the counting of cycles there. Okay, that summarizes the last few segments. Now the textbook we're using is called The Scroll of Biblical Chronology and Prophecy, and it's available on the website worldwidewebtorahtimes.org. Okay, and this is for those of you who want to jump into the middle of the chronological explanation so you don't miss what I said at the beginning about where to get the resources for this. Okay, now in this segment I want to start to detail Israel's chronology in the land after they entered into the land. Okay, so we will roll our way from Joseph here, okay, to the Exodus. Okay, now we discussed the 40-year period, but this has to be broken down into 2 parts. There were 2 years. In the first year they went out. In the second year they put up the tabernacle. Okay, and toward the end of that year they were going to enter the land, and then they had the 12 spies spying out the land, but 10 of the spies came back and brought back a bad report, and the people believed them rather than trusting in the Almighty and trusting in His promise. They decided that they would trust in the report of the 10 spies. And for that, He said that they would wander in the wilderness to the completion of the 40 years. So actually, it was 38 years from that point that they actually wandered. We go down here, and we see there's several scriptures here. Here, Deuteronomy 2:14. Can you get that in there? I'm going to move this down a little bit. Okay, Deuteronomy 2:14. And the space in which we came from Kadesh Barnea until we were come over the brook Zered was 38 years. Okay, so it was 38 years. This is the 38th year. There's a line ending it right there. Okay, and that's when the conquest of the Transjordan began. Okay, and this was in the fall of the year they conquered the Transjordan, and then in the following spring, that's when they crossed the Jordan into the land of Israel to begin the conquest of that. Now, the actual conquest itself lasted 1 sabbatical period. and they divided the land up on the eve of the sabbatical year. And we can figure out how long this period is from the remarks in the text about how old Caleb was at different points in time. Okay, in Joshua 14:10 we learn, it says, "And now behold, Yahweh hath kept me alive, as he said, these 45 years." Okay, now what Caleb is referring to is the fact that when the 10 spies sinned and he judged them, that it was 45 years ago in Caleb's reckoning. Okay, and as I said, that happened in the second year after the Exodus. So here's the second year after the Exodus. Okay, and here's the first of the 45 years. Okay, so Caleb tells us that 45 years had passed. So we come down here to the 45th year, and this allows us to show that the conquest of the land was actually 7 years. That's this blue column here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So they were 7 years conquering the land, or actually half a year conquering the Transjordan, and 6.5 years conquering the land of Israel proper. Okay, so I call this the conquest here. Now, this period here, which I call the elders period, there is actually no specific number for this period. It has to be computed out. All right, but the answer to how to compute that out is in this tan column right here. When they started conquering the Transjordan, they conquered a town called Heshbon in the fall of this year, and then they occupied it. Okay, now this column here for the occupation of Heshbon goes 300 years. We focus over here on this column as we go down. 300 years. Okay, here's the 300th year. Okay, and the key passage here is Judges 11:26. It's a remark by Jephthah, who is going to deliver Israel from the sons of Ammon. And he says, "While Israel dwelt in Heshbon and her towns, and Aroer and her towns, and in all the cities that be along the coast of the Arnon, 300 years. Why did you therefore not recover them within that time?" Okay, so this 300 years refers to how long Israel occupied the town of Heshbon before the sons of Ammon recovered them. Now, the sons of Ammon recovered Heshbon in the first year of the judge Jair. Jair is a Transjordan prophet, judge that ruled for 22 years. But he didn't control all of the Transjordan, only an enclave of it. The Ammonites actually got the part with Heshbon in it back before, at the end of the judgeship of Tola. So by using this 300 years as an endpoint in the beginning of Jair's period here, and then another important part here is that, of course, the Ammonites took over all the land of Israel for 18 years at the end of Jair's judgeship. Okay, so if we back up here, then knowing that that period was 300 years, being given a long period, we can fill in this period called the elders period. This is the X that we compute out after accounting for all of these other time periods. Okay, and we can tell that it's actually 14 years going. Okay, and the components of this are, they served Cushan Rishathaim for 8 years, so that's this pink column, 8 years. And then the judge Othniel came and delivered it. Now, I'm going over this and giving you a one like thematic part of the chronology at a time, because there's a lot of details that I'm skipping over, but I'm trying to give the overview of the chronology using the long eras and showing you how it's put together before going into greater detail on it. So there's a lot of things in this chart that I'm skipping over for the time being, for the moment here. Okay, so we have Othniel judging for 40 years after this oppression. Okay, now if we look at Judges 3:1, and the land had rest 40 years, and Othniel the son of Kenaz died. This phrase here, and the land had rest 40 years, is very important. It means that people who try to overlap the judges with the oppressions are incorrect, because during these oppressions by foreign domination or nations, Israel is not actually having rest. They're in servitude, they're in slavery to these nations. So this phrase rest clues us in that the chronology is very orderly, and one set of years follows the next set of years. We don't have to assume any overlaps in the chronology. Okay, when Othniel died, Eglon, king of Moab, oppressed Israel for 18 years. Okay, and then Israel cried out and was delivered by Ehud for a period of 80 years. Okay, and here's the end of the 80 years right here. Okay. Then another, after Ehud died, they served Jabin of Hazor for 20 years. Okay, and again, Deborah delivered them, was a prophetess judge who delivered them for 40 years. And it says here in Judges 5:31, it says, and the land had rest 40 years. So again, the text is cluing us in that these periods of time are not to be overlapped. The oppression, servitude, enslavement of Israel is separate from the time that the judges ruled, or when they had rest from their enemies and servitude. Okay, of course we have Midian for 7 years, and Gideon delivered them for 40 years here. And it says in Judges 8:28, and the country was in quietness 40 days, 40 years in the days of Gideon. So that's telling us again that they were having peace. They were having solitude and rest, and there's no judgeship, no oppressions overlapping these 40 years. We get a usurper named Abimelech that oppressed Israel for 3 years, and then they were delivered by Tola, the judge Tola, okay, for 23 years. And then Jair rose up in the Transjordan and delivered the Transjordan, his department of the area of the Transjordan, for 22 years. And then the Ammonites crossed the Jordan and took all of Israel for 18 years, okay, and they were delivered by the judge Jephthah. And then we get several minor judges in sequence, where we have all the numbers for these in Scripture. Ibzan 7 years, Elon 10 years, Abdon 8 years. Okay. Then we get a period of the Philistines ruling for 40 years. Okay. And we're told in Scripture always clears up anything that might be confusing or mislead us on the chronology. It clears us up somewhere. Samson, who assigns 20 years, it says in Judges 15:20, and he judged Israel in the days of the Philistines, 20 years. What this is saying is that in this case we are allowed to overlap Samson's 20 years with inside the 40 years of the Philistines. And we assume that when Samson pushed over the pillars of the Philistine temple, that was the last year that the Philistines bothered Israel and put them in servitude. So then Eli, the high priest, took over at that point, which is this yellow column here, and he judged Israel for 40 years, okay? And then at the end of Eli's life, the Philistines destroyed the tabernacle at Shiloh and took the ark. And for 20 years, Israel was not following the Lord. And then at the end of those 20 years, it says, Samuel told them to put away their false gods, and their strange gods, and their Ashtoreths. And then he delivered them from the Philistines, the beginning of Samuel's rule.